The saltiest thing you ate yesterday probably did not taste salty at all, and if you are in your 40s or 50s and quietly proud that you never touched the salt shaker, I have news that may explain why your blood pressure still will not budge. The shaker was never your problem. I am Dr. Hale. In my 15 years in internal medicine, I have lost count of the patients who told me, almost the same way every time, "I do not add salt, doctor, so my sodium is fine." They believed it completely. And their blood pressure kept climbing anyway, because the salt shaker on the table is responsible for only a small slice of the sodium most people eat. The rest is already inside the food before it ever reaches your kitchen. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 70% of the sodium in the typical American diet comes from packaged, processed, and restaurant foods, not from the shaker. So today I am going to walk you through 5 everyday foods that are quietly raising your blood pressure, counting down to the #1 hidden source that is probably in your kitchen right now. I am going to give you 2 more things at the end that are not salt at all but push pressure up just the same. And I am going to be honest about what actually moves the needle. Because most of what you hear about salt is either scare talk or false comfort. Stay with me, because the food at #1 is one that almost nobody would ever call salty. First, let me show you why sodium raises pressure in the first place, because once you see it, every food on this list makes sense. Think of the sodium in your blood like a sponge. Wherever sodium goes, it pulls water along with it and holds on to it. So when you take in a lot of sodium, your body hangs on to extra water to keep everything in balance, and that extra water raises the total amount of fluid moving through your blood vessels. Now picture a garden hose. Turn the water up higher and the hose gets tight and firm under the pressure. That is your circulation on too much sodium. Same hose, more fluid forced through it, higher pressure against the walls. Do that day after day, year after year, and those vessel walls take a beating. That is how a mineral you cannot even taste in most foods becomes one of the biggest drivers of high blood pressure in the country. Here are the numbers that put it in perspective, and they surprise almost everyone. The American Heart Association recommends most adults aim for no more than about 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day, and it names an ideal target closer to 1,500 milligrams for many of us, especially as we get older, or once blood pressure starts creeping up. Now here is the gap. The average American takes in well over 3,000 milligrams a day, often much more, and almost none of that comes from the shaker. So most people are running at double their ideal every day, and they cannot see where it is coming from. That invisible gap is the whole reason this video exists, and it is why willpower at the dinner table barely moves the needle. You cannot resist salt you never knew was there. Now let me count down the 5 foods, and I want you to be honest with yourself about how many are in your kitchen. #5 is sauces, dressings, and condiments. This is the sneaky one that undoes an otherwise healthy meal. Soy sauce is almost pure sodium in liquid form, but so are the quiet ones. Bottled salad dressing, barbecue sauce, ketchup, teriyaki and marinades, jarred pasta sauce. Even that heart-healthy salad turns into a high-sodium meal the moment you pour on a couple of tablespoons of dressing. Picture salting your food without ever seeing a grain of salt. That is a condiment. The American Heart Association points to these everyday sauces as a steady, invisible source, because you use them a splash at a time and never add it up. #4 is canned soup, and this one hurts, because we hand it to people when they are sick or tired, thinking it is gentle. A single can of ordinary soup can carry a large share of an entire day's worth of sodium, sometimes most of it in one bowl. It does not taste that salty because the fat and the warmth and the other flavors mask it, but the sponge does not care whether you taste it. Canned soups, canned broths, and those instant noodle cups are some of the most concentrated sodium sources in the average pantry. The American Heart Association includes them on its short list of the biggest offenders for exactly this reason. Number 3 is deli meat and cured meat. Sliced turkey, ham, salami, bologna, bacon, hot dogs, sausages. Here is the trap. People switch from red meat to lean deli turkey, thinking they made the healthy choice, and by weight, deli turkey can be one of the saltiest things in the whole refrigerator. Sodium is doing double duty in these meats, adding flavor and preserving them, so it is packed in. A stack of cold cuts in a lunchtime sandwich can quietly deliver a big chunk of your daily limit before you have touched anything else. Lean does not mean low sodium. Those are two completely different things, and the label counts on you confusing them. If even a couple of these are staples in your week, and I suspect they are, take 1 second right now and subscribe to Dr. Hale, and tell me in the comments how old you are, because the age of the people watching genuinely shapes what I cover next. Alright, the top 2. And number 1 is the food you would never in 100 years call salty. Number 2 is restaurant meals and frozen prepared dinners. When someone else cooks for profit or for the freezer aisle, sodium is their cheapest tool for making food taste good and last long, and they use it generously. A single restaurant entree can hold more sodium than you should have in an entire day, and that is before the appetizer or the side. Frozen dinners, even the ones labeled healthy or lean, are often built on the same heavy hand with salt to keep them tasting like something after freezing. This is a huge part of why the CDC keeps pointing at restaurant and processed foods rather than home cooking. When you eat out or heat up a tray, you have almost no control over the salt, and there is a lot of it. And number 1, the food quietly adding the most sodium to the American diet is bread and rolls. I know. It sounds harmless. A slice of bread does not taste salty at all, and that is exactly the point. No single slice is a disaster, but bread is on the top of the list, not because any one piece is high, but because we eat so much of it, all day long. Toast at breakfast. A sandwich at lunch. A roll with dinner. A bagel, a wrap, a bun. It adds up quietly, slice after slice, and it is one of the leading sources of sodium in the country precisely because it hides in plain sight and we never suspect it. The blandest food on your plate may be the one doing the most. Let me tell you about a patient. I will call him Ray, and he is a composite of many people I have seen. 62 years old, retired, a genuinely disciplined man. When his blood pressure came back high, he did what he thought was right. He took the salt shaker off the table completely. He was almost proud of it. But when we actually walked through his week, the picture changed. Breakfast was toast. Lunch was a deli turkey sandwich on 2 slices of bread most days. Dinner a few nights a week was a frozen dinner or takeout because cooking for one felt like too much, and a bowl of canned soup was his easy standby. Ray had removed the one source of sodium that barely mattered and left every big one untouched. He was not careless. He was aiming at the wrong target because nobody had ever told him where the sodium actually lives. Once we swapped a handful of those staples, his numbers finally started to move. Same effort. Right target. And that is the hopeful part of Ray's story. So let me say it plainly. He did not have to give up bread, or sandwiches, or a bowl of soup on a cold night. He just had to see where the sodium was actually coming from and trade the heaviest few sources for lighter versions. Lower sodium bread. A leaner amount of deli meat or fresh roasted chicken instead. A low sodium soup or a homemade pot he could freeze in portions. Small, boring swaps kept up week after week. That is what moved his pressure, not willpower, and not the empty gesture of hiding the shaker. Now I promised you 2 things that are not salt at all but raise blood pressure just the same, so let me keep that promise. The first is black licorice, the real kind made with actual licorice root. This sounds like a strange warning until you know the mechanism. Real licorice contains a compound called glycyrrhizin, and it can cause your body to lose potassium and hold on to sodium, which drives blood pressure up. This is well established enough that the Food and Drug Administration has specifically warned that if you are 40 or older, eating a couple of ounces of black licorice a day for as little as 2 weeks could land you in the hospital with an irregular heartbeat or a spike in pressure. If you are a black licorice fan, this is not a scare tactic. It is a real and specific caution, and it climbs with age. The second is heavy alcohol. Many people think of a nightly drink or two as harmless, or even good for the heart, but for blood pressure the picture is not so kind. The American Heart Association is clear that regularly drinking more than a little alcohol is linked to higher blood pressure, and that cutting back is one of the real changes that can bring it down. This is not about the rare celebration, it is about the steady daily pour that adds up, and it is one of the most reversible drivers on this entire list. Let me also debunk the comfort that got Ray into trouble, because it is that common. I do not add salt, so I am fine. You now know why that is false. The shaker is a rounding error next to the bread, the deli meat, the soup, the sauces, and the restaurant food. Cooking a fresh meal at home and adding a modest pinch of salt yourself will almost always leave you with far less sodium than a supposedly unsalted convenience meal, because you control the amount and there is no hidden reserve baked in. Home salt is visible and small. Hidden sodium is invisible and large. And here is the encouraging flip side, because I do not want to leave you feeling like every food is out to get you. When you cook at home, you hold the salt shaker, but you also hold every other flavor: garlic, onion, black pepper, lemon, vinegar, herbs, chili, cumin, smoked paprika. Your tongue reads all of those as rich and satisfying, and none of them raise your pressure. Most people who cut back on sodium slowly find that their taste actually resets within a few weeks, and the heavily salted food they used to love starts to taste harsh. Your palate is not fixed. It adjusts. Give it a month of real cooking, and the low-sodium version stops feeling like a sacrifice and starts feeling normal. So let us bring this together into what to actually do this week. Here is your short list. 1. Read one label today. Just one. Pick your usual bread, your usual soup, or your usual deli meat, find the sodium number and the serving size, and be honest about how many servings you really eat. That single number tends to change how people shop more than any lecture ever could. 2. Pick one swap, not 10. Move from canned soup to a low-sodium version or a homemade one, or cut your sandwich to one slice of bread, or swap 2 restaurant nights for simple food cooked at home. One real swap you keep beats a perfect plan you quit. 3. Take charge of sauces. Measure dressing instead of pouring, put it on the side, or dilute soy sauce with water. A splash less, several times a day, adds up in your favor. 4. Look honestly at alcohol, and if black licorice is a regular treat, take the FDA at its word and keep it occasional. And one clear line before we finish, because it matters. Everything I gave you today is education, not medical advice, and it is not a substitute for your own doctor. I do not know your numbers, your kidneys, or your medications, and some people on certain prescriptions have to handle sodium and potassium differently, so this is a conversation to have with the person who knows your chart, and know the red flags. If you ever get a blood pressure reading around 180 over 120 or higher, especially with chest pain, shortness of breath, a severe headache, trouble speaking, weakness on one side, or changes in your vision, that is not a wait-and-see moment. That is a call for emergency help right now. Here is the thread I want to leave you with. Sodium is one hidden force pushing your blood pressure up, but it is only half the story. There is a mineral most people do not get enough of, one that works like sodium's opposite and actually helps relax those vessel walls and bring pressure down, and it is missing from most American plates. In my next video, I am going to show you where to find it and how it quietly counters everything we talked about today. Subscribe so it lands in front of you. Whether you are 45 or 75, you are never too early and never too late to take the pressure off those vessels. And the version of you 10 years from now, with a steadier heart and clearer arteries, will be grateful you started reading labels today. I am Dr. Hale. Take care of yourself.